May I go?
Recording has started. Yeah, please.
Okay, so good morning and welcome to this first debate of a project that the Florence School of Regulation is performing for the Commission. I will now share my slides, so I will provide a short introduction to this project and why we're here today. So the project is about the enhanced role of guarantee of origin to promote decarbonized gases. As I mentioned, the Commission has asked the Florence School of Regulation to look into this issue and to see how decarbonized gases can perform and can provide a basis for promoting renewable gases and decarbonized gases guarantee of origins, the role of guarantee of origin in promoting decarbonized gases and renewable gases. I might try to go to the next slide. Hopefully I will manage to do it. Let me see if I can do it. Yeah, okay. Okay, what the project is about? The project is about looking at the current legislation and the role of guarantee of origins in the current EU legislation, and also what experience we have from the implementation of this legislation, including the previous renewable directives. And then look at what is the potential role of guarantee of origins in promoting decarbonized gases and in particular renewable gases. And then looking also at the barriers, what barriers do exist in this role, in the use of guarantee of origins as a main tool for promoting renewable vectors, renewable gases and renewable vectors, and if there are barriers, how we can overcome these barriers, or what other role the guarantee of origins could perform. As part of this, we are committed to hold 2 online debates on the issues discussed in task 2 and 3, so on the identification of the role and the assessment of the role of guarantee of origins to promote renewable gases. And then in the end, we will have a policy brief which will summarize not only our findings as part of the project, but also the outcome of these debates. So this is what we are up to. This is, as I said, the first debate. The next debate will be on the 6th of November, and it will be focusing more on the governance of the guarantee of origin system. As we know, guarantee of origins are already available. Until now, they've been mostly used for disclosure purposes, so to inform final consumers of the mix of sources that the electricity is coming from. But obviously now we're looking at an enhanced role, and therefore we have to see whether also the governance should be updated and reinforced. In fact, as Ilaria will show you in a moment, we have already had some reflection on this topic, and we would like to propose a system whereby the guarantee of origins not only promote decarbonized gases and renewable gases, but also renewable vectors more generally, because we believe that there is a question mark as to the most efficient mix of renewable vectors towards achieving the 2030 renewable energy target. But this will be presented by Ilaria. So on my side, I would like to conclude this brief presentation by telling you what will happen in the next hour and a half. Immediately after me, Antonio Lopez Nicolas will provide an introduction on behalf of the European Commission. As I said, the European Commission commissioned this project to the Florence School of Regulation, and Antonio will provide the perspective of the Commission on the use of guarantees of origins for promoting renewable gases. Then afterwards, Ilaria Conti, the head of gas at the Florence School of Regulation, will present our initial thinking on this topic. The idea is that today's debate would be a way of assessing whether we are going down the right direction, and to collect also feedbacks from the audience. And then there will be a panel discussion. Then Ilaria will moderate, in which we will have a number of stakeholders. We will have Gerrit Volk from BNetzA, the German national regulators. We have Jem Watson from Eurogas. We have Stefan Campus from ENSOG. We have Els Brouwers from IFIEC. And then we have Doug Wood from IFED. After their introductory remarks, we will have polls. We have 3 polls where we will ask attendees to this workshop, participants, to provide their views on 3 separate questions about our proposal and more generally about the role of guarantees of origin in promoting renewables. And then the panelists will address the results, or the comment on the results of this polls. They will also answer a few questions that we will pick up from the audience. So please use the question and answer facility in this platform to submit your questions. Just a piece of housekeeping, this debate is web streamed and it is recorded and will be available on the Florence School of Regulation's YouTube channel later on. So be aware that what you will be saying will be available later on. So this is not Chatham House rule, is just an open, and in fact is an open debate. And in fact, we want to be as inclusive as possible because this is part of contributing to the policy making of the Commission in us, at least in a small way. So this is all I wanted to say at the moment. I'll just stop my sharing of the slides, and I will now ask Antonio to provide some introductory remarks on behalf of Director General for Energy. Thank you very much.
Yeah, good morning, everybody. Thanks a lot, Alberto, and thanks a lot to the Florence School of Regulation for organizing this timely debate in such a crucial moment for policy making in the EU in the context of the Green Deal. This is a very crucial and interesting topic that we have been discussing for the last, I think, 2 years, approximately, in the context of the Madrid Forum and other fora. And we are coming now to the moment where the Commission will have to review legislation and to decide how to move forward on that front. So to give you a bit of the current policy setting, I mean, you are all aware of our energy system integration and hydrogen strategies that we released on the 8th of July. These are key elements in enhancing our climate ambition and building an energy system which is fit for climate neutrality, an energy system which already consumes and produces 75% of the emissions. So we want to decarbonize this cost effectively. This strategy, I think, has three main vectors, 3 main pillars. I mean, is around having a more circular and energy efficient energy system, increasing direct electrification of end-use sectors, and also promoting the use of renewable and low carbon fuels for the hard to decarbonize sectors, including hydrogen. We have in parallel release a hydrogen strategy to try to turn hydrogen into a viable solution for contributing to climate neutrality. So this is, I think, the policy mindset, and these strategies contribute to the higher ambition as reflected by the climate target plan, by which the EU wants to achieve a 55% emission reductions by 2030, which would entail a renewable share of 38 to 40% in final energy consumption. So these elements are at the basis of the legislative work which is starting, in particular the revision of the Renewable Energy Directive, which was launched during summer with the ambition to deliver a proposal by a review by mid-2021. Both strategies touch upon the key issue of terminology and certification. I mean, if we want to promote renewable and low carbon fuels, including gases, we need to distinguish those from more polluting sources. This is absolutely key for informing consumers, but also to decide what to support at national or European level, and also to facilitate trade across borders. If we don't know what we are talking about, it's difficult to create that market. So those strategies already contain some framing for what the Commission will be doing, and speak about a system of a comprehensive terminology and a system of certification. I think two important elements to flag there. I mean, we are speaking about a system of certification that covers all renewable and low carbon fuels. So this implies liquids, but also gases, and obviously includes hydrogen. And it speaks about the accounting for the full life cycle emissions on the production of those renewable and low carbon fuels, so that we are able to provide the right information about the climate impact of the different fuels. So this is this work, as said, is starting now in the context of the review of the Renewable Energy Directive. Of course, it will entail looking at elements on guarantees of origin, on sustainability certificates, and we will be analyzing the different options on how we can deliver on this ambition in our impact assessment, with a view to make a proposal by mid next year. So as said, I mean, really looking forward to the discussion today, and to learn from the different insights in the discussion today, as well as the further evolution of the project that you are undertaking for us. Thanks a lot for that.
Thank you very much, Antonio. Thank you for the introduction, putting this project into the context of the much wider policy debate and the action of the Commission in the Green Deal. So now Ilaria presenting our current state of thinking in this project.
Yes,
Ilaria?
absolutely. Also trying to share my screen. Okay, yes. So now you disappeared and only my slides remain. So thank you very much for the introduction. Thank you to both Alberto and Antonio for, I think, a great introduction to this topic. The scope today for us is to launch really the debate on this proposal that Alberto and I elaborated, which was somehow already, let's say, internally tested a few months ago. But today, as Alberto already mentioned, the scope is really to extend the debate to a wider audience and to possibly get your feedback. So do not hesitate to intervene with the Q&A chat. Let's Antonio already perfectly went through the climate and energy targets for Europe. They are well known. We all know about them. We also know that they are being reviewed. Here you see already the 55% reduction target for greenhouse gas emissions, which was announced only a couple of weeks ago in the State of the Union speech by President Ursula von der Leyen. And we heard just now also from Antonio that the second target, so the renewable energy in final energy consumption share, is currently being assessed to be around 38–40%, also in line with the Green Deal announcement. Also, we have the third target, which is energy efficiency, which is foreseen to be to assess around 32.5% by 2030. So what we are focusing on today, though, is the second target, so renewable energy in final energy consumption. If we take a look to these slides from the European Commission, we can easily see that meeting renewable energy targets has never been particularly easy, but with the increasing ambitions for targets for 2030 and the final decarbonization target for 2050 for a net zero economy, appear, let's say, very difficult, if not unattainable for most of the European member states. So we wonder if there is really a need for an instrument which is able to facilitate this achievement of renewables targets, but at least cost. And with Alberto, we reasoned around this difficult question, and we came up with a proposal which implies that having given, given this target of renewable energy in final energy consumption, how much each vector can contribute to achieving this target. And by vector here, we mean electricity, hydrogen, gas, basically all renewable energy vectors. And do not pay too much attention to the pies, the way they are drawn here. They are, let's say, just for reference, just quite random shares. But the message is that we think that the least cost combination of renewable-based energy vectors is the one for which the marginal cost of being green is equalized across all vectors. What does it mean? It means that we equated at the margin the cost of turning a certain energy vector into green. So if you want the cost of greening a certain energy vector, so that we get the optimal shares of renewable energy for that vector. So it's not the marginal cost of the vector itself, but it's the marginal cost of making it renewable. There's no doubt that the way forward in all the scenarios that we read, that we come across in our daily work, is a greater electrification plus clean molecules. So the role of gas is certainly very important. It has been reconfirmed also in recent scenarios. I'm thinking of the recently published BP scenario, which will see a combination of electrification and cleaner molecules, I would say. But if we look at the current support schemes that are in place, we know that there are four main types of support schemes: feed-in tariffs, feed-in premiums, green certificates, and investment grants. But they all relate to renewable electricity. Until today, there are of course some exceptions. There is some very limited support for renewable gas. But at the same time, the targets for green hydrogen and biomethane are more and more ambitious. Here you see now a well-known table. I mean, data elaborated based on the Gas for Climate study released only a few months ago, where we see that very big increase in the share of biomethane, biogas, and hydrogen is expected for 2030 and 2050, even more. So to some extent, we agree that European climate policies that led to decarbonization so far were focusing on electricity, and they were not really designed to decarbonize gas. So the question is it the time for an instrument which can support at the same time an optimal combination of renewable energy vectors? So abandoning the idea of renewable electricity versus renewable gas and thinking of them in terms of renewable energy vectors. The objectives, as I hope I clarified, is of course meeting the renewable targets, but also at the same time achieving cost efficiency, so doing it at the most efficient cost through, and this is our proposal, an enhanced version of guarantees of origins. And here we can also discuss maybe later if the name is the right one or if it needs also an upgrade. And with let's say the additional or collateral benefits of at the same time promoting sector integration, which we know is also a very important element of the European strategic vision for the energy sector, and at the same time also facilitating the standardization or harmonization of guarantees of origins, which is anyway a process which is already in place, but with the final aim of simplifying and therefore facilitating traceability, trading, and so on of GOs. The immediately related question is, are guarantees of origin the right instrument? Can they play a role in promoting this equalization of marginal costs of being green across different vectors? And also, which features should they have in case? Well, we start from what we have at the moment. We have the definition of renewable energy in the RED 2. It's a very well-known definition. It includes mainly renewable electricity and some types of gas, biomass, landfill gas, and biogas. The guarantees of origin in this case would complement decarbonization targets. As I said, we should distinguish very clearly the second target from the first target. So the achievement of a bigger share of renewable energy in final energy consumption from removing CO2 emissions from the environment. So these are two different targets, and we are addressing only the renewable energy one. Third, it should be supporting the integration of clean electricity and gas as energy vectors. So, as I said, this would help the thinking, abandoning the silos thinking and thinking in terms of sector coupling. Guarantees of origin could be the right instrument, we think, but there are some current limitations, let's say we can call them so, in place, which foresee the use of guarantees of origin solely actually to disclose information to consumers on a voluntary basis. This is the current status. Our proposal instead would consist in upgrading this instrument to become a common currency for sustainability. So we would need to go from an instrument which looks at electricity only or mainly to an instrument connecting energy vectors. From an instrument which is voluntary to an instrument which should become compulsory, statutory. In this case, then the upgraded GOs would not only deliver informative value, but informative and market value. And they could apply not only to consumers, but, and this is up for discussion, to suppliers, large consumers or distributors. That's it. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Ilaria. Thank you for presenting at least the outline of our proposal, at least our current state of thinking. I think it's now up to you again to moderate the panelists and for the first round of initial remarks, after which we will have the polls and I will pick up some question and answer. So Ilaria, it's back to you.
Okay, thank you, Alberto. So let's immediately start with the discussion, because to use efficiency also in the panel. And I would immediately give the floor to Gerrit Volk, head of unit at the German regulator Bundesnetzagentur. Is Gerrit connected? Probably there are some technical issues. So let's wait while we wait for him to reconnect. Perhaps then, James, I believe it's your turn. You have the floor. James Watson, Secretary General of Eurogas.
Thanks, Ilaria. You're certainly going to keep me on my toes, moving me in up to the front. Yeah, no, thanks very much for the invitation. It's great to be here today. And this is a really timely piece of work, especially as the Renewable Energy Directive is currently under recasting. And I think that, when we're looking at something like guarantees of origin, for us, we see it overall as another tool that we need for the overall decarbonisation of the energy sector. From a gas point of view, we've always believed very strongly that you have things like carbon pricing. Recently at Eurogas, we've also developed our views on targets. We need in our opinion, we need to set specific targets, 20% greenhouse gas intensity emission reduction target by 2030 compared to 2018, which would be underpinned by an 11% renewable gas target by 2030, which might fit into what Antonio is saying as the potential 38–40% renewable energy target by 2030. But we would see that as part of our overall greenhouse gas intensity reduction target. But outside of pricing and targets, we also see the need for guarantees of origin. So to be sort of back into the topic of this particular workshop, we see a number of tools, but we see each of them having their own important role. And I think for guarantees of origin, we also believe that it's necessary that we find the right framework that would indeed deliver the system that can also help investors and also help consumers to understand exactly what kind of energy they are consuming. But I might just pick up a quick point about some of the things you presented, Ilaria, because just again in the context of things, I think we definitely wouldn't see hydrogen necessarily as a separate vector from gas as it was portrayed. Our view would be that indeed the two should be considered together. If we look at the gas network today, our view is that today it's a methane network, but we recently did a study with DNVGL, which basically predicts that by 2050 it will be largely a hydrogen network. So in essence, we're talking about the same thing. So gas and hydrogen is just going to be the new form of molecules that we will use to a larger extent than methane in 2050. But in the meantime, there will be plenty of methane. However, we don't think it's correct to split them out. They are going to be needed together, and it is the decarbonisation of the vector that is important. I think you also mentioned about the fact that there is limited support for gas today in member states. You mentioned the French example. We are seeing more and more growing. Portugal set a target for electrolyser deployments. The Germans in their hydrogen strategy have done the same. And so I think this is an area where we're actually seeing a growth of an understanding that we need to decarbonise this vector. On the other side, of course, natural gas is very cheap and is also already decarbonising sectors in heating, power and others. So it's the sort of the contradiction, if you like, that already what we have is already decarbonising, and knowing that we need to decarbonise that vector is then making some leaders of some countries. In any case, there's much to agree with what you said, Ilaria. Certainly the end slides are more or less where I will go now briefly with my points. The way that we see it is that guarantees of origin are currently defined basically to include gas and hydrogen in the Renewable Energy Directive under Article 19. And we think that under Article 19.2, there's also the possibility for member states to issue guarantees of origin for energy from non-renewable sources. And this would be for us the opportunity to see GOs being issued for the non-renewable gases that we see that would be important. So the so-called blue hydrogen, or hydrogen that's produced using natural gas, because there would be a concern that otherwise these would be excluded from the guarantees of origin system. And we think actually they should be included because obviously it makes sense that this is playing an overall role in decarbonising the energy vector and ultimately achieving the carbon neutrality objective. We are very much engaged, indeed, looking at the standards around the development of guarantees of origin. We're working in the Senelec working group, which is looking at the standard that should be used and whether or not there would be a separate one for hydrogen or one for hydrocarbons. And I think that we take the view more, as I mentioned earlier, that there should basically be one standard because we think that that makes sense. More broadly, we certainly see that it is important that RED II revision should include the requirement. So, going along with that sort of more, as you were saying, more recommended, not recommended, more of a statutory approach, that member states should issue GOs for those decarbonised gases. And we also believe that that should therefore also include standardised carbon footprint information, because if you are actually able to do that, you are able to compare what you're actually getting from your GO and what that level of carbon reduction is in that GO, so that consumers and others can also transparently see what they're actually buying. This may also need that if you do have those upgraded GOs, that we should also have available information within the GO on the sustainability criteria that relates to RED II. And then actually that would then support delivery of RED II targets. And so this is a kind of positive reinforcing mechanism to achieve the increased objectives that we have, whilst also providing good support for industry through the investment certainty they get from the delivery of guarantees of origin. Moving more towards the end of my point, I'll just say that we think it's important that there shouldn't be a forced geo conversion, forced conversion for geos when H2 is developed into blending. So if you put hydrogen into the natural gas system, you shouldn't be forced to have that geo relinquished at that moment, because we think that this might just add extra complexity and administrative costs, which would be unnecessary, because then would you issue another geo for the green hydrogen on the other side. So we think that this is important, that we have certainty about when and where the geo would be actually relinquished. And I think that one of the most important things, and I think it was also mentioned by yourself, Ilaria, that tradability aspect across all countries with a common standard will make such a big difference to having an effective market in geos. And that's what we would really want to see, is that if you produce something in Portugal, you can relinquish that in Finland, or Greece to Denmark. These are important elements to get liquidity and fluidity into that market. And ultimately, I think that if we do achieve that as well, that will be something which will help this market be one of those other tools that I've mentioned, carbon pricing targets, and make sure that geos takes its place. I'm not sure if I've used all my time, Alberto. I think
yes, thank you very much, James. Very dense, but very good. Okay, so I think now we can give the floor to Dr. Volk of Bundesnetzagentur. Yes, can you hear us?
Yes.
Great. Yes,
okay.
Perfectly. Please go ahead.
Thank you very much. Sorry that I came too late. It was a technical problem, but now just in time, and I can start. My name is Gerrit Volk, and I'm from the Federal Agency for Network in Germany. We are part of the economic department of the government in Berlin, but we are located in Bonn. We work on renewable gases since 14 years. We have in Germany renewable gases in biomethane. There were built up plants for about more 12 years, I think, and we produce in Germany 1% of the natural gas consumption, of the gas consumption. 1% is biomethane. That's the only renewable gases we have in Germany, and it's transported in all parts of Germany. In former times, there was a goal to have 10% of the natural gas consumption in Germany of biomethane, but this goal was thrown away because they saw that would be very expensive. In the situation now, we have prices to produce biomethane as a renewable gases of 5 to 6 times to the imported natural gas. That's the biggest border to expand the production and the selling of natural gas. In the autumn last year, the economic department formulated, together with other departments of the German government, a strategy for hydrogen. The goals of the German government is very high, and they have a big goal. So the gas industry, or the gas consumption, should be in the year 2050 completely carbon free, and this should be managed by renewable gases, and there especially hydrogen. The strategy of the German government in this time, on today, is not integrated into the European strategy. That may be a fault, because we are on the local position in a central role of Germany in transportation, the gas from the north to the south and from the east to the west. So if we use hydrogen in our gas grid, And this is not only a separated gas grid for hydrogen. There would be a mix in the pipes. So we have in Germany a big discussion if there should be a separated hydrogen grid, or should the hydrogen put into the natural gas grid. So there should be a mix. There are two blocks in the discussion. The one block says there should be a mix of natural gas and hydrogen, and the other block says no, that is too difficult to use this mixed gas, and there are two difficult situations at the border of Germany to the other countries if there is a mixed gas. We are at the beginning of this discussion. Nowadays we have started, or the last 2 months we have started and finished discussion with industry. And the industry I'm talking about is the network industry, but also the consumers, like the big industrial consumers, steel companies, automotive companies, or chemical companies, down to private households, which uses gas, and we asked them 41 questions. And this session for the questions ended last month, at the end of last month, and now we are looking at the answers. We have got 91 answers from 91 organizations, companies, and federal institution, which is, if there is on these 41 questions, sometimes a journal thinking about to answer about it. But we see, recording myself, we see two blocks. On the one side, the mixing of natural gas with hydrogen. On the other side, the people and organization which are talking about two separate nets grids, only for hydrogen and only for natural gas. And there is another big discussion in Germany.
Dr. Volk, I'm sorry, could you conclude, please, as we are running out of time? Thanks a lot.
Okay, and the other big discussion is where should we come from the hydrogen, only green hydrogen from renewable electricity, or also of natural gas separating the CO2. Thank you very much.
To you, many thanks. And the floor now goes to the president of ENTSOG, Stefan Campus. Please, Stefan.
I should not forget to unmute myself. The energy transition, I think, is not only about renewable energy, but more general about the lowering of emissions in the most cost-efficient way. And the next step that we will see for these low emission future requires suitable marketplaces, and also an opportunity to trade the environmental advantages of low and zero carbon energy. So for me, it's always the answer to the question that the ETS system puts forward, and then with the help of the GOs, I can give an answer. The final decision on how GOs should look like, how much, how many, is not something for us as TSOs. It's something for the market participants and the society, but we are there because, of course, we have to live with that afterwards and work with that afterwards. So we have tried to help out in this field. We are chairing jointly with GIE the Prime Movers Group on GO. And on certificates since 2 years. We try to assist in the legislative field, and we work or help to work on the standardization. the impact of different solutions for the GOs need to be carefully judged, because we are running then into a future with something that shall set up the whole thing. So we need an analysis of the longer term outcome of the application of several or different methods that we can use there. And allow me one personal comment. I'm astonished that it is so complex and that is nearly emotional. I thought that to be easier, because I thought ERGA has already led the way, paved the way. Now we combine the national systems, lead that into one harmonized and standardized system, and we are done. That is obviously not the case. On the other hand, I would invite everybody to be a little bit more perhaps relaxed, as we might not get this perfect in the first round, but there's time then to adapt and to move on. But a perfect solution fitting to everybody's needs is something that is really, really difficult to achieve here, obviously, as I have learned. So from our position, it is important that these GOs will be based on a lifetime or a life cycle analysis of energy carriers, harmonized and standardized across Europe. And you will hear the word across many times now. So they should accurately reflect the externalities, including the greenhouse gas emissions. They should be easy transferable across the energy carriers and across the borders. So easy handling, making them something of everyday's life. And they should be compatible with the EU ETS system. So externalities, transferability across energy carriers, cross-border, and across the legislations. Next part is that we need now a joint effort and the support for the work on the RED II, MRR, and so on and so forth. All the new legislation that has to come should accomplish a part of this way. Yeah, so we should find the same standardized and harmonized passages there. And last but not least, be aware, CEN is working on that. And CEN means that we come to a European standard. I know that CEN normally works with up to 500 written comments if they write something. And in this case, there are a lot of people helping them, so it won't be easy for them. But there is time that is running out. And that is not only my time for this speech, but also the time for them to deliver. That would be mid next year. They are under a stress. It would be helpful if the participants would ease a little bit, calm a little bit, not be so emotional about the GOs, because it's better to have something jointly that is not perfect, but that broadly supported, so that we can execute. As in total, I think now the time has come for execution and doing something. And we are still very much in the talking mode and thinking mode. But implementation needs to come, because we want to be ready with everything for big scale. Hydrogen, for example, might that be green or of any other color in 35. And then I must say from the side of that was the 5 minutes over. So from our side, this is clearly nothing, yeah, because preparation of infrastructure takes its toll on time. Thank you.
Many thanks to you, Stefan. Thanks a lot for being really on time, for having even people cheering up for you. Very good. So I'm now giving the floor to Els Brouwers, Head of Energy Climate at IFIEC, and here speaking on behalf of IFIEC.
Yes, thank you very much also for the invitation to contribute to this debate. As you said, I'm representing IFIEC, the industrial consumers in Europe. First, the starting point for discussion is of course the Green Deal and the climate neutrality, and we all know that we will need a mix of instruments to come to that ambition. And for us in industry, we also notice, as you've pointed out in your presentation, that there's a lot of attention for electricity, and there's not that much attention for the other vector we need most, and it's for us heat. Heat by energy vectors that should generate it by all kinds of new gases. and that's what it's about. Principally, the industry and IFIEC is in favor of certification of energy origin for disclosure, for transparency, and also for trade. What we notice, of course, is also what was said before, is that the tradability of the certificates is, let's say, not optimal yet, and there's work to be done there. Of course, certification as such does not change the physics of life and not the physics of energy. So that's also a discussion to take. But specifically here, if I hear also the other speakers and the position that has taken, the question I would ask is, are we here to produce or are we here to reduce? And I mean with that, you can look at the angle of producing renewable energy, which is one of the ambitions of Europe, but the main ambition is, of course, climate neutrality. It's to reduce greenhouse gases, and the production of renewable energy should also serve that ambition of climate neutrality. That's the first point. And also the certification that we're talking about here is in the question, what is the final purpose of this certification? Is it commercial? Is it for compliance? And that's a question that we should ask ourselves, and also in the Commission, in the revisions of the legislation to come, is what should that certification serve? The discussion here until now has taken place in the framework of the RED and the RED directive that will be revised. But what we notice from industry side is that we see linkages between the RED and the ETS that were maybe not meant, but who are influencing the operating mode of industry. Industry who has to be compliant with ETS, the question has been asked before. So it's a very important part of legislation that will drive industry's energy use. So also for renewable gases, they could gain importance in view of the ETS if they would be used for compliance in ETS. Therefore, they need to be certified, the origin of the energy. They should be tradable, and they should be recognized in the monitoring regulation. So that's a request. Now, if we think about such an aim for certification, which could be for ETS, but by the way, could also be for compliance of member states under Article 3, then the view that all energy vectors should be certified on the same system is not really suitable for that aim. There's a huge difference between renewable electricity, of course, because electricity does not entail any emissions when you use it, but the same is valid for hydrogen. If industry uses hydrogen, no CO2 is emitted, so there's no problem under ETS to use that hydrogen and to comply with your ETS. When we're talking about, I would not call them decarbonized gases, I would call them climate neutral gases, but biogas and others, of course, we do have a CO2 emission when we use those gases. So there's a distinction to be made between gases with emissions and gases without emission if we look at ETS and environment where the industry is working in. So we therefore need the recognition of all those climate neutral gases, being it synthetic gases, biogas or others, to be climate neutral under ETS, and also the certification should look at that aspect if it's to be used therefore. So important point is decarbonized gases, to our point of view, is a little bit a limited view on the potential of climate neutral energy or heat, because decarbonized is only hydrogen. There's more than hydrogen, of course. We think that climate neutral gases could gain importance and also their certification by recognizing for compliance in ETS and Article 3, for example. If we use today biogas and we would have it certified and it's somewhere else injected in the grid, it's not possible yet to have that certified under ETS. If we talk about that certification and you would link it to compliance, then you need a firm certification procedure looking really at the origin of your sea. Is it fossil or is it not fossil? And the proposals that are on the table to use LCA are of course not compatible with a firm greenhouse gas accounting system. So if we want to use certification for greenhouse gas accounting system, you cannot contribute, you cannot attribute a half emission factor or an 0.8 emission factor to something that is climate neutral. You have to be firm in being climate neutral or not, and having a robust system of what is CO2 coming from fossil fuel or not. And for the industry, it's very important that we have a clear and transparent view on what legislation is serving. If we look at the red, and the red is afterwards used to influence the ETS, it has to be clear what effects it has on the emission factors. It has to be clear that the greenhouse gas accounting system in the ETS should still work. And I think that's something that also the Commission should think about when revising ETS, when revising for sure the red, that those legislations should work together towards climate neutrality and should not hinder the ambitions of CO2 or renewable production.
Many thanks, Els. And as each of you has taken about 1 minute extra, now we are exactly 5 minutes late. It's mathematics, and I give the floor to Doug, please. Doug is the chair of the gas committee from EFET, the European Federation of Energy Traders.
Thank you very much, Ilaria, and thanks to FSR for organising today's session. It's extremely helpful to do that. Within EFET, we've had a group looking at the promotion of GEOs for gas for a couple of years now, but of course we've been involved in GEOs for power for much longer than that. And in that context, I'd like to make 5 broad points, if I can, within the 5 minutes available. And the first is to recognise that there are learnings to be made for GEOs for power. We've seen them having greater success under RED II, especially as part of corporate purchasing arrangements. And there's different elements of that I think we can learn from. One is around the design of the products, where we've seen consumers demanding things that are very specific. They've been looking at Dutch wind from a part less than 5 years old. And so in order to make them appeal to customers, we have to consider what attributes must be collected to make these products attractive, but also to recognise that this needs to be done in a packaged way that we can promote a wholesale market. The second issue related to the design of GEOs for power has been under developing trust. That we've got to remain vigilant over concerns about double counting, about fraud, about transparency, particularly with regard to additionality. And to take these as learnings into any scheme for decarbonised and low carbon gases. And the third attribute for GEOs for power is around the legislative or contractual framework and how we recognise the renewable benefit and ensure its transferability in a trading scheme. So our first learning is GEOs for power. The second point to make around that although decarbonised and low carbon gases are increasingly recognised as an essential part of how we get to 2050. What we have at the moment is a very diversified set of national structures, but also inconsistency and overlapping schemes between GEOs and other support mechanisms, whether that's certificates or other aid, and between gas and power. And what's important, and this was mentioned by Stefan and by James also, is to develop a much more common framework that even if in the early days we see different national schemes, then ultimately we see a common framework that will ensure any GEOs or the future of GEOs can be tradable across border. And that's particularly important if we also see expansion of these schemes to new sectors such as transport and heat. The third general point I would make, and this is one I would shout out to a report that Frontier Economics prepared for us and was published earlier this year, and I see that Frontier are in attendance today, about gas decarbonisation and sector coupling and promoting a more market-based framework. And this ties also in with Ilaria's point early, is if we want people to be able to make economic decisions about where to invest in different technologies, we need a harmonised EU-wide carbon pricing scheme that can be applied across different technologies, across the different vectors, and across the different sectors also. Now, in the early days, we may need more than that in terms of support mechanisms to get particular technologies promoted. But ultimately, to have everything traded under a reformed and expanded ETS is going to provide that way for commercial investors to be able to optimize investments and to signal this for private investment, rather than rely on politicians or bureaucrats writing technological choices into the legislation on where people should be making investment. I think that's a very important signal to avoid. So the question, my fourth point, the question is, how do we get from GEOs as they are currently into something that's tradable as part of an ETS framework? Because as Ilaria also explained, the bilateral, they're not mandatory. There's a range of things that they don't contain the necessary information. And we've been looking at two pathways for that. One is either just to continue to hold GEOs as an entry-level, lower cost means for consumers to be able to disclose or to demonstrate environmental credentials, but to focus on a mandatory scheme, and there are existing mandatory schemes, and allow the mandatory scheme to evolve into an ETS tradable instrument, and people can graduate from GEOs into this mandatory instrument. Or the other way is to take the GEOs and add the necessary additional information to enable them to be tradable under ETS. So whether we start to collect information on greenhouse gas emission reductions, and if it's not calculable, then can there be default values for particular technologies or sectors? And then how do we add additional sustainability information in order to allow these to be to meet the standards required under ETS? Although recognizing the ETS framework additionally must evolve to be able to accommodate the additional sectors and the current technologies that are not currently addressed. And the jury is still out on which path is better. There are pros and cons of each of those paths, and we've been trying to lay them out to be able to understand what are the strengths and the weaknesses of each approach that would need to be addressed in any legislative framework. And finally, my fifth point, which I think also ties in with Ilaria's comment, was until we have full convergence with ETS and we have multiple certificates, how can we allow tradability between those certificates? If there are different certificates for different technologies or different sectors, and that might be through some kind of exchange rate mechanism prior to a full common currency being emerged. And I think that's I've gone over slightly, sorry.
Many thanks. Thank you very much, Doug. Thank you, and thank you not only to you, but also to all the other panelists, because I think they raised some very straightforward points, or I mean, really on the topic. And as we said with Alberto, the idea today is really to present to you our proposal, and with the idea to, of course, refine it. And in the next workshop in November, we will focus more on the details, really, of the proposal. So we will discuss more in depth the governance, the possibilities relating to the governance, why not, how to link GEOs to the ETS. All of this is more part of, let's say, a more in-depth discussion that we will engage in the next few weeks. And maybe, Alberto, you would like to add something quickly at this stage?
Yeah, just because I was looking at the questions, because later on we will pick up questions from the audience, and a couple of issues come up repeatedly in the questions, which is probably worth clarifying at the moment, even though we will stay at a very general level, because I think it's not yet sufficiently refined. There were two questions, one related to the relationship between the scheme that we envisage and the ETS system, and the other one was about the role of GEOs in promoting hydrogen. Very quickly, I mean, there are two relevant targets here, as Ilaria mentioned. One is for decarbonization, the other one for renewables. Now, GEOs can serve three purposes. They can serve the current purpose of disclosure. I think, I think it was Doug perhaps mentioned that sometimes consumers like to buy or to believe that they buy electricity from wind parks in the Netherlands, whatever. That's disclosure. Then the second one is the decarbonisation, which is basically settled around the ETS scheme. And here the guarantee of origin can include information about the carbon content of the various vectors, which could be useful for the application of the ETS. And but the third role that the same geo could actually play is as an instrument to achieve the renewable target. So if we were in the old world where these certificates were pieces of paper, some of them would be printed on green paper. They would include exactly the same information, but they will they certify the renewable origin. So the same certificate could play different roles depending on which target you're aiming at or which service you're looking at. Therefore, what we are talking today is something on top of the ETS. ETS is promoting decarbonization. Renewables are part of the decarbonization strategy, but we also have a separate target. So we need also an instrument, which are sort of these green guarantees of origin, to promote the achievement of this target. And when it comes to tradability, then if we have this system as a mandatory across the union, then we can think of trading between vectors, because at the end of the day, the target, as Ilaria highlighted, is a target for overall and final energy consumption. It does not separate electricity, gas, hydrogen energy consumption, and also across jurisdictions, as most of you have proposed and suggested. Hydrogen can be produced by renewable energy or otherwise. It means that hydrogen will have a green guarantee of origin issued in exchange for a guarantee or a green guarantee of origin, which will be cancelled and which will relate to the vector that is the renewable vector, which is used to produce hydrogen. So renewable electricity will come with a green certificate, with a green guarantee of origin, and it will be cancelled when this renewable electricity is used to produce hydrogen, and then a new green guarantee of origin will be issued when the hydrogen is produced. So there will be always traceability of the greening of the vectors. I think this is just to clarify a number of questions, but I would also like later on the panelists to comment on this summary that I gave on the question we've received. So now I think we can go to the polls. Ilaria, would you like to run them? Should I run them?
I can do that as you wish. Okay, so I think Chiara is ready. Yes, so we prepared 3 polls for you, and then we will ask our panelists to comment on the results. So we are aware, and as I also mentioned in my presentation, that RED II currently limits guarantees of origin to only the function of showing to final consumers that the energy was produced from renewable sources. So do you think this legislation should be changed to remove this limitation? First answer is yes, because guarantees of origins could have actually a different role in this, in promoting also an efficient mix of renewable-based energy vectors, as we explained, in addition to the information showing disclosure purpose. No, we think that if you think that guarantees of origin are unsuitable for this scope, and no, third option, if you think that there are already better instruments covering this. Please vote. Oh, very good. So there is a striking majority in favor of the first option. So it's very good to see that most of you think that there could be scope for improving GOs. Thank you very much. We go to the second. What would be the greatest added value of this potential upgrade of GOs? The simplification and harmonization of the current certificate system, a concrete step to show that sector coupling can actually exist, highlighting the cost of switching to green, as we described, it's the core of the proposal, providing market signals also to investors and information to regulators to show where action is needed. facilitating trading, also as Doug described, across energy vectors and across different energy systems, therefore creating new business opportunities. Or the last option, if you do not see any added value in this upgrade. Please vote. Okay, well, slightly more mixed results, and we see that the winner is facilitating trading. So, Doug, you were quite convincing, it seems, on this specific aspect, but very interesting results. Let's proceed to the third. Let's imagine that guarantees of origin are used to promote this optimal mix of renewable-based energy vectors. How should that work? Across vectors, across jurisdictions, across vectors and jurisdictions, or there should be no cross-utilization? This question refers to the fact that geos can take as a basis different types of vectors, therefore connecting the different renewable vectors. But do you think that these should work also across member states, for example? Should it be like a cross-border scheme, or should it be national? That's trying to simplify the scope of the question. 63% thinks that it would probably be more useful to have this instrument working both across vectors and across jurisdictions. And there are, again, the rest of the voters are a bit divided between option 1, 2, and partly 3. Okay, very interesting results. I would like to start with the comments from the panel about these results. Let's start in reverse order, I would say. Doug?
It's not just James you're keeping on his toes, it's me also by changing the order. These were very interesting questions, I thought, and they played into a number of comments that I tried to make in the short 5 minutes. So the first one was specifically about the two pathways that I talked about. Do we build on the existing geos, or do we keep geos in their current format because there's an existing market there and they're a nice feed-in level, but focus instead on an alternative instrument? So it's very interesting to see quite such a large support for building on the current geos as a way. I think within EFET we're much more balanced about the pros and cons of doing that, and some of the advantages of using already mandatory instruments and building them then and keeping geos for something else. As we're still working, I think both ways are possible, and it's something we can continue to study. You describe me as thank you for your support in the vote on the purposes of whether they can facilitate trading. The other thing that was very important to me that I thought I mentioned was the importance in getting an economic signal, market signals for investment. So those were two things that I emphasized, and it's good to see that they were the top two, and 51% chose one or the other. So it's great to see that the attendees in this call at least recognize the importance in market signals in order to achieve an economic and efficient means of achieving the different targets. And similarly, the final one, that it is possible to do this across both vectors, across vector and jurisdiction. And indeed, it's important to do so, as a number of us have said. So I'm very pleased that the wider discussion feels like it's endorsing what many of us have been considering in our individual discussion groups, that we can build on together.
Thank you very much, Doug. Then Els, please.
Yes, thank you. Very interesting questions indeed, and I was also happily surprised by the answers on the market role, of course, because that's what will rule a little bit also investments in the future. Another point that's also very interesting, and that links a bit to the point I tried to make in when I was speaking, is that it should be usable across jurisdictions. And then I would like to come back again on, okay, you have the aspect of the RET and you have the aspect of the ETS. And it's very interesting to hear that the same GO could contain different, also then be a clear cut in what the Commission or the legislation wants it to be used for. I come back to the idea of having an LCA-based GOO, whereas you're in fact taking different emissions that are belonging to different targets in Europe into one instrument. You're taking the whole life cycle, where some emissions are in a non-ETS, some emissions are ETS, some emissions are even outside of Europe, and you all translate them in one figure that you call then an LCA figure for a certain energy vector. Whereas if you look at compliance in ETS, it's you have a CO2 or you don't have it at your chimney point. And you have to comply with that. And it's totally not related with that other figure, which will be a totally different figure, even making international emissions part of the ambition of Europe. So we have to choose what it's used for, and if there's different figures, how we will be sure that the right figure will be used for the right jurisdiction. If we look already today, how the RED II criteria for sustainability are now influencing the monitoring regulation, where you can see that some of the carbon neutral biomass that it's used will be counted as fossil because it's not meeting the sustainability criteria. It will be very hard for people to know at the end what targets are we fulfilling with what instrument. We need a clear-cut greenhouse gas accounting system, and GOs can play a role if they're clear and separate from another aim that could be the RED. If there are LCA requirements, norms, standards, fine, but that's something else as greenhouse gas accounting. And we have to keep those separate. So it's interesting to see across jurisdiction, but I don't see even in the units how this could happen. The one is megawatt hour and the other one is ton CO2 or origin CO2. So let's think further on that point.
Thank you very much. Very good points, Els. Stefan, please.
First of all, I've learned that we need to reduce the limitate in RED II, and I didn't know that word before, but it's certainly a good expression. But then I would like to
Latin.
I would like to look back to what I have learned from the poll with a view back from 2050. In 2050, we have a very complex system because there are many sources of renewable energy, of low carbon energy, and I think we as infrastructure operators, we accept the task to make it then easier, to be the system integrator, and then to make the life for the customers easier. They will want to know from us how many kilowatt hours have I put in, got out, and second, what was the environmental quality of this kilowatt hour. And I have seen that in the poll there was a lot of unified or unanimous view on certain things and what the GOs shall deliver. And this is, for me, one of the most important things. So you get from us a ticket, and you find on the ticket you have received so and so many kilowatt hours, and then you have a certain label to it. And then you are able, for example, to measure that against an ETS obligation, because you then would not have to pay for that. So I think we are more advanced in the view than we currently believe ourselves. Because if I see more than 100 people are now in the auditorium, and we have such an alignment on what GOs can deliver and should deliver, that I think we are on a good track there. There are just some specifications where we see some discrepancies that we need to overcome, the one or two GOs and things like that. But basically, they shall, across the border and across the vector, deliver a measure for the value on the environmental side, as opposed to the sheer or mere kilowatt hour. I think there was huge agreement, and that is very promising. That was more than I expected.
Thank you very much, Stefan. The floor goes now to James for quick comments, please.
You're catching me out again. I was expecting it to be Dog the Walk, but okay. It's been my day today. No, that's. I think the polls have been very interesting, and I would points mainly to the fact that there's a lot of coherence between what the polls are saying and what we've all been saying. And I think that's actually something we can be reassured of, that in essence, it seems we do have a lot of views that are indeed converging. And I think this is what we would like to see. I mean, looking at the sectors that are here speaking and given the number of participants that we have. I think the first question, if you're talking about, yes, the current system and building on it, that's a very good direction that you can go in. And I think that this is the way that I think many people would see it. You don't want to just strike away everything that's already been done on GEOs, which is, you know, previous jobs. We fought hard to win that system. So it is about how you upgrade that system and make it more suitable to do things like going across vectors and jurisdictions. And I think that this was very striking to me, because this is the main point I think that almost everybody has talked about, that we need to make sure that a GEO system, because it is more flexible, it is more liquid, it will have more value and more value for the investors. It will provide investment signals if there is that cross-border tradability. And I think, you know, for gas is cross-border. I mean, there's always the old saying, electricity is local and gas is global. This is absolutely true. So it must be cross-border for us. So being cross-jurisdiction is absolutely vital, because it is like that. Maybe in the future it'd be less like that if we have more decentralization, but in principle, we still talk about hydrogen backbones. So my view is that with this kind of view that's being reflected still talks about the way that we see gas, and that is moving. You move energy effectively, and therefore you must have that cross jurisdiction. Cross vectors make sense because you're building on from where we're coming. And I think this also reinforces the Eurogas view that really the idea of single is better than double. We don't believe in split markets. We think that that's not necessarily good for anybody to have, you know, whether you're a trader or whatever, having different types of markets doesn't make sense. And risks, administrative burden, plus a lack of clarity and coherence for individuals who are engaged in understanding what the different vectors are doing. So definitely very happy with the final one. And the middle one, yeah, I think it's good for Doug, but I think we would also accept that. I think that when you're talking about facilitating trading and investment, that's what we want. We want the trading and investment in these new products, in these new types of gas, because I think everyone's saying that we accept that there is a new renewable and decarbonised gas future. And so we need to make sure that the investment signals are there and that the trading signals are there. And therefore, it is important that GEO is fundamentally part of delivering that message to the traders, to the investors, but also to the governments who are setting the policy. So we have to make sure that all of this is converging, a bit like our views today around the hundreds of participants and ourselves, and that we are going in that direction, and therefore we will get these products in a cost-effective way, because GEOs will also help deliver cost-effectiveness. And it's not just about efficiency, it's about effectiveness. Thanks, Stefan. So yes, I think I'll stop there because I got a thumbs up. You can't get better than that. Thanks.
Very good. Very good, James. Thanks. And now the final comments from Dr. Volk, please. And then we give the floor back to Alberto for conclusions. I think you're still muted. If you could unmute yourself, please. No, still not working.
I think
now, yes, now we can hear you.
Sorry about that. I will have a short answer. I was surprised or astonished about some of the answers. We have experience in Germany that the GOs on the biomethane is very, very expensive because it needs lots of work. And so I will expect that this will be the same in the hydrogen. But we saw it at the answers, it will be very important for the market. But what's about the market? There will be only a business case if the big difference between the hydrogen produced by green electricity and the natural gas will be shortened. And how should be this difference shortened? In this moment, there could only be the natural governments. And that money from the national governments means taxpayers' money. So the only business case and a market for hydrogen in a big, expensive, in a big market, if there is a much smaller difference between these two products. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So my job ends here for today, and now I will give the floor back to Alberto for concluding remarks, or if you want to pick anything from the audience, comments to the panels. Do what you like, Alberto, please.
Thank you very much. Thank you also for doing an excellent job of keeping the panel to the time and handling it, including the polls. Indeed, I think the results of the polls are quite outstanding. Indeed, this was not the first time we ran these questions. We ran them internally. I think Ilaria already mentioned it. At the end of May, when we had a workshop reserved to our donors. And there, the majority was not as large as this time. There we had, on the first question, we have 73% of the attendees in favor. Now we have 83, 85, something like that. So it is clearly a mandate, well, at least from these people, to elaborate on our proposal. And I think it was also very interesting that there was an overwhelming majority, around, I had it written here somewhere, 60-something% of making the guarantee of origin sort of tradable across vectors and across jurisdictions. Now, I think we need to recognize a few implications of this. First, and we also need to confront ourselves with a bit of history. Trading across vectors means that the composition, as Ilaria mentioned, the composition of the different vectors in delivering the renewable target will be left to the market to determine. So if a vector is more expensive to be greened than other vectors, this vector will be contributing less to the overall target. So if one vector is very costly to be greened, there won't be much green version of that vector. Now, then locally, or a policymaker can decide to promote with other instruments on top of this common currency. But clearly, this is the implication of having the guarantee of origin tradable across vectors, meaning that, for example, your obligation to have 10%, no, sorry, to have 40% of gas from renewable sources could be met by, in fact, using electricity, green electricity, to meet that obligation. Because at the end of the day, as we said, and as Ilaria highlighted, the target is for the total of final energy consumption, not by vector. So this is the implication. I think we just need to be aware. On the other hand, by having tradable across vectors, we will achieve the least cost mix of green or of green vectors. So there is a trade-off. Now, there is also a trade-off when we go across jurisdictions. And here, obviously, if you trade, first of all, if you want to have a system of guarantees of origin for the purpose of meeting the renewable target, which are tradable across jurisdiction, first of all, you have to have a mandatory system. You have to have all those linked into this trading area to subscribe to a statutory system, mandatory system, where this is the main instrument for achieving the renewable target. You cannot have trading between different jurisdictions of different approaches, because then you end up with double counting. That's the first thing. The second thing, and here where history comes into play, the Commission tried back in 2007, preparing the 2009 package, environmental package, to propose tradable, I think it was called something like certificates of origin, something like that, and didn't manage. Because while carbon emissions are considered, and they are, global issues, renewables also provide a lot of local benefits. So authorities in one member state may not be happy for the renewable target of that member state to be served by using renewable production in another member states, because the benefits of the local benefits of production of renewables will be accruing somewhere else. Again, there is a trade-off here, because there are very large differences in the cost of renewable vectors compared to the normal vectors, non-renewable vectors in different member states. So if we can make the best use of these differences, we can achieve the target at least cost. And the more ambitious the target becomes, the more it's important that we try to reduce or minimize the cost. So we will be, and then there is a third dimension which was not mentioned, we will be looking into now is the time granularity of the scheme. Whether, for example, you can meet the obligation now with some renewable energy which was produced yesterday, last week, last month, next week, next month, tomorrow. But these are the details. I agree with many of you that we have some sort of agreement among ourselves in the panel and also the audience that this is the way forward. Ilaria and I will continue to work on this to further specify. The devil is always in the details. There is also the idea of how to monitor this system, how to avoid greenwashing to an extent, even though some sort of greenwashing is implicit on the tradability of these guarantees of origins. Maybe we'll start to call them guarantee of renewable origins to differentiate, the green piece of paper with respect to the white piece of paper, the content of which would be exactly the same. So we will work and then we will come back with our, with a more elaborate proposal on the basis of the feedback that we received today in a month's time on the 6th of November, where we will be looking at the details, also some governance. I think today, very important indication that the current system could be upgraded to become a common currency for promotion of renewable energy. We do not need another system. We can use the current one. Obviously, it needs upgrading. At the moment, it's voluntary. We need a statutory system. We need some mandatory element of it. We need to see what happens when we extend, as I mentioned, trading across jurisdictions. So there is a lot of work to do in the details, but I share Stefan's view that, at least among those who were in the debate today, there seems some consensus that this is the way forward. So I would like to thank all the participants. I mean, there were other questions. Unfortunately, we don't have time to address them, but most of them are actually about the relationship with ETS and the use of guarantee of origins for promoting hydrogen and the additional nature of guarantee of origin, which I hope I addressed, but we will be coming back to these issues in the more elaborate proposal that we will be presenting in a month's time. So what remains me to do is, and I have to say that Antonio was in the program to provide concluding remarks with me, but unfortunately he had to leave. He had other commitments this morning, early this afternoon, so he could not be with us. Obviously, we'll report to the Commission on the outcome of this debate and also on the results of the poll. So I would like to thank Ilaria, obviously, for the joint work that I've been doing and for helping me for running this debate mostly in a way that I would have not been able to do. Our panelists, Dr. Falk, James Watson, Stefan Campos, Els Brouwers, and Doug Wood. Antonio for the introduction and for sharing the general framework from the Commission. And last but not least, Chiara, she's in the background. Without her, none of this would have been available. And she ensured that we all convene here at the right time with the right IT support. So thanks a lot, Chiara, as well. And until next time, as I said, on the 6th of November, next step in this journey. And then by the end of the year, we will come up with a policy brief where we will try to present our proposal, including taking benefits of the remarks that we received today. So thanks a lot. Have a good afternoon and see you, if not before, in a month's time.
Many thanks.
Florence team.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye-bye.